Have you ever realized that the people who once called you worthless end up needing you the most? That's exactly what happened to me, the daughter who was cut out of her own family's fortune, only to become their last hope when everything collapsed. My name is Emily Carter, and I was born in Dallas, Texas, into a family where money was the language of love. My father, Robert Carter, owned a chain of luxury car dealerships, and my mother, Linda, was the kind of woman who smiled only when someone else envied her. I was their middle child, too quiet for my father, too stubborn for my mother, and too honest for both. When my grandfather passed away, everything changed. The will was read on a humid summer afternoon, the kind where the air felt thick enough to choke you. The lawyer's voice echoed through the dining room as names and amounts were listed. My brother, Andrew, got the family house in Austin. My sister, Charlotte, got stocks and jewelry. And me? Just one line. To Emily, nothing, as per the family's prior decision. I remember the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. It wasn't anger at first, it was confusion, disbelief, like watching someone else's nightmare. My mother avoided my eyes. My father kept his hands folded, calm as if it were business as usual. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. Nothing? Not even a keepsake? I asked. My voice cracked, half fury, half plea. My father finally looked at me. His words cut sharper than any knife. You chose to walk away from this family, Emily. Actions have consequences. I had left home 2 years earlier after a fight, the kind that burns bridges forever. I refused to join the family business. I wanted to study social work instead of marketing luxury cars to the rich. That single choice branded me as the disappointment. Back then, I thought independence meant freedom. Now, sitting in that suffocating dining room, it felt like punishment. My siblings watched in silence, their faces a mix of pity and relief. They were glad it wasn't them. That night, I drove back to my small apartment on the edge of town. The city lights blurred through the windshield as I fought to hold back tears. The smell of burnt rubber from the freeway mixed with the faint scent of lavender from the car freshener, two worlds colliding, luxury and survival. In my one-bedroom apartment, I sat on the floor, the will still trembling in my hands. My reflection in the glass coffee table looked like a stranger, eyes red, mascara running, hair tangled. I whispered to myself, "You're on your own now." Completely. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to bury the humiliation. I picked up extra shifts at a local diner, pouring coffee for men in suits who reminded me of my father. Every time I heard the clink of coins in the tip jar, it was a reminder. I was building a life from scratch while my family floated in luxury. But what I didn't know was that their perfect little empire was starting to crack. Slowly, quietly. Months later, I got a call from a number I hadn't seen in years. My sister, Charlotte. Her voice trembled, not with arrogance this time, but fear. "Emily, it's Dad. We need to talk. Things aren't good." My stomach dropped. I didn't know it then, but that single phone call would drag me right back into the world that once threw me away. And then I found out something that changed everything, something they'd been hiding from me for years. And that's when I discovered the truth that made me question everything I thought I knew about my family. Let me tell you exactly how it all began, long before the inheritance, long before the silence between us hardened into something unbreakable. When I was a kid, my father used to say, "Carter blood doesn't bend. It wins." I didn't understand it then, but what he really meant was that love in our house was conditional. If you performed, you were praised. If you failed, you were forgotten. Our home in Dallas was a mansion, but it never felt like one. It was spotless, cold, and full of rules. We couldn't eat in the living room, couldn't raise our voices, couldn't feel too much. My mother's perfume, Chanel No. 5, always lingered in the air like a warning. Stay composed, stay perfect. I remember one night when I was about 12. I'd gotten a B on a math test, and I was terrified to tell my father. While my siblings showed off their straight A's, I tried to disappear behind my chair. He noticed, of course. He always did. "What did you get, Emily?" A B, I whispered. He didn't yell. He just sighed, folded the newspaper, and said, "That's the difference between you and your brother. He aims higher." That was the first time I felt small, not because of the grade, but because I realized no one was going to fight for me. As the years passed, I started craving approval like oxygen. I joined debate club, volunteered, won scholarships, but it was never enough. The house stayed cold. My father stayed distant. My mother stayed silent. The breaking point came when I turned 21. I told them I wanted to study social work at the University of Texas. My father stared at me like I'd said something obscene. Social work, he repeated. You want to throw away a business degree for that nonsense? It's not nonsense, I said. I want to do something that matters. You're a Carter. Money is what matters, he snapped. That argument stretched into hours, voices raised, tears shed, threats thrown. My mother finally said it. If you leave, don't come back expecting anything. And I didn't. I packed a suitcase that night, just clothes, a few photos, and a notebook, and I walked out. The sound of that heavy oak door closing behind me felt like a wall sealing shut. At first, I was proud. I thought I was brave for choosing my own path. But freedom has a price. I worked part-time jobs, skipped meals to pay rent, and studied by candlelight when the power got cut. There were nights when I'd look at the city lights from my window and whisper, I made the right choice, didn't I? But deep down, I wanted one text, one call, one sign that they still cared. It never came. When my grandfather died and the will was read, I realized they hadn't just cut me off, they'd erased me. My name, my existence, my place in the family, gone. After that day, I stopped talking about them. When coworkers asked about my family, I'd say they lived out of state. When friends asked about holidays, I'd say I was too busy to visit. The truth was simpler. I didn't have a family anymore. One winter night, I got sick, the kind of flu that knocks you down for weeks. I remember lying on the bathroom floor, shaking, surrounded by unpaid bills. No one knew. No one cared. That's when I realized something I'll never forget. Sometimes, family isn't the people who share your blood, it's the ones who'd notice if you disappeared. And I thought that was the end of it. That I'd learned to survive without them. But life has a cruel sense of timing. Because the moment I finally started to heal, the people who abandoned me were about to come knocking again, desperate, broken, and needing the one person they once called a mistake. And I thought I'd buried my past for good, but I was wrong. The night after Charlotte's call, I couldn't sleep. Her words kept looping in my mind, we need to talk. Things aren't good. For years, I'd imagined them thriving without me. My father still in charge, my brother driving luxury cars, my mother hosting charity dinners. The thought that something could shake their perfect world almost didn't feel real. When I finally answered her follow-up text, it was short. I'll come tomorrow. But don't expect me to fix anything. Driving back to that house after 6 years felt like time travel, the kind that makes your stomach twist. The mansion looked the same. The iron gates, the manicured lawn, the stone fountain that never stopped running. But something was different. The paint was peeling in spots. The grass looked dull. Even the air felt heavier, like the house itself was exhausted. Charlotte met me at the door. She'd aged not badly, just stressed. Her smile was small and certain. You look good, Em, she said softly. You look like you haven't slept, I replied. Inside, the house was dimmer than I remembered. The chandelier bulbs flickered, and the smell of lavender polish barely covered a faint odor of dust and neglect. My father was in his study, the same room where he used to scold me for dreaming too small. When I entered, he didn't look up at first. His posture was hunched, his hair grayer. A pile of papers covered his desk, bank notices, overdue bills, foreclosure warnings. Finally, he said my name, almost as a question. Emily. Dad. You came. You called. The silence between us was unbearable. Years of resentment sat between us like a third person in the room. He cleared his throat. We're in trouble, he said simply. The business, it's collapsing. I looked at the letters on his desk, red stamps, bold words, past due, final notice, repossession. The empire that once shut me out was crumbling. What happened? I asked. A bad investment, he said. Your brother's idea. We expanded too fast. Then sales dropped and, well, the banks don't wait forever. Charlotte spoke up from the corner, her voice trembling. They're threatening to take the house, Em. We're drowning in debt. I wanted to feel satisfaction. I wanted that vindication, the poetic justice of karma. But what I felt instead was something closer to grief. This was the man who'd told me I wasn't good enough, now looking at me like I was his last lifeline. So, what do you want from me? I asked quietly. We need a loan, he said. You work at the State Foundation, don't you? You must know people, investors, donors. You want me to save the business? I interrupted. We want your help, he said. For the family. For the family. The same words they used to exile me. You mean the same family that left me with nothing? I asked. My voice cracked, anger bleeding through. You made your choice, my mother's voice suddenly cut in from the doorway. She looked frail, but her tone was still sharp. You left. Don't act like you were the victim. That broke something in me. Left? You kicked me out. You made sure my name wasn't even on the will. Her face twitched. My father's jaw tightened. No one spoke for a long moment. I took a step closer. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a clone. Someone who'd sell their soul for a company logo. Well, congratulations, you got that in Andrew. And now look where it got you. Charlotte burst into tears. My father lowered his head. My mother turned away. For a second, I felt the power shift. The girl they dismissed was now the one standing tall, and it terrified them. But then, behind that flicker of strength, something else surfaced. Guilt. Because no matter what they'd done, this was still my family. When I finally left that house, the sun was setting, a crimson streak against the Dallas skyline. I stood by my car, the warm air thick with the smell of dust and gasoline, and let the wind hit my face. I told myself I was done, that I wouldn't get dragged back into their chaos. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Families like mine don't fall quietly. They implode, dragging everyone with them. And it was that night I realized, you can escape your home, but not the scars it leaves inside you. And soon, those scars were about to be ripped open all over again. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, texts from Charlotte, missed calls from Andrew, even an email from my father's assistant asking if I'd had time to reconsider. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that study again, the unpaid bills, the slumped shoulders of a man who once terrified me. It should have made me feel powerful, but instead, it made me feel nauseous. At noon, I sat in a cafe downtown, staring into my black coffee as the Texas sun scorched the sidewalk outside. My reflection in the window looked older, hardened, the kind of person who'd been forced to grow up too fast. That's when I saw him, my brother, Andrew. He slid into the seat across from me without asking. He looked polished as always, crisp white shirt, gold watch, perfect hair. But his eyes gave him away. They were desperate. You ignored Dad's messages, he started. Because I don't owe him anything, I replied. He's still our father, Em. He stopped being that the day he cut me out of my life. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Listen, I messed up, okay? The investments, they went bad faster than I expected. I thought I could fix it before Dad found out, but it got out of control. Now the company's bleeding, and the banks are threatening to seize everything. I stared at him, this man who'd always been the golden child, now admitting failure for the first time. You didn't call because you missed me, I said. You called because you need me. He didn't deny it. His silence said enough. You've got connections, he said finally. You work with nonprofit funding. You know people who'd trust you. And what? You want me to ask them for money to bail you out? Please, Em. Just talk to them. You don't have to do this for me, do it for Mom. For Dad. Something inside me snapped. Don't you dare use them as an excuse, I said, voice shaking. You all made it clear years ago that I wasn't part of this family. You cut me out, humiliated me, left me to rot. And now that you're drowning, suddenly I'm worth calling. Heads turned from nearby tables. I didn't care. I was done staying quiet. Andrew looked away, his jaw tight. I'm sorry, he muttered. But we're out of options. I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like it might break your ribs. And then I said it, the sentence that would change everything. I'm not saving you. Not this time. His eyes widened. You can't mean that. I mean every word, I interrupted. You taught me that money is everything. Well, now I finally have something you don't piece. And I'm not trading it for your mess. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe he didn't. The version of me who used to beg for approval was gone. When I stood up to leave, he grabbed my wrist. If you walk away now, you'll regret it. I looked him straight in the eyes and said the line that would echo in his memory for years. No, Andrew. I regretted staying silent. I regretted needing you. But walking away? That's the first thing I'll never regret. I pulled my arm free and walked out. The sun hit my face like a spotlight as I stepped onto the street, hot, blinding, liberating. My hands were trembling, but for the first time, it wasn't from fear. It was power. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker like tiny fires. Somewhere across town, my family's empire was crumbling and I felt free. But also something darker, guilt. Because as much as I wanted to believe I'd closed that chapter, I knew deep down this story wasn't over. Families like mine don't fall quietly. They drag you back, piece by piece, until you either forgive them or destroy what's left. And that night, I decided which one I'd choose. I was done being their mistake. I was about to become their reckoning. After that cafe confrontation, I thought walking away would feel like closure, but it didn't. It felt hollow, like ripping off a bandage and realizing the wound underneath never really healed. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. I threw myself into work at the Dallas Family Outreach Center, the nonprofit where I'd been volunteering for years. Helping others had always grounded me, but now it carried a different weight. Every time I met a struggling mother, a runaway teen, or someone trying to rebuild their life from nothing, I saw pieces of myself reflected back. One afternoon, after a long shift, I stayed behind to organize supplies. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, and the faint smell of coffee and cleaning products filled the room. I was stacking canned food when Mark, my supervisor, walked in. "You've been quiet lately," he said, leaning against the doorway. "Just family stuff," I muttered. Family stuff or emotional earthquake? I laughed to spite myself. Maybe both. He smiled, the kind that didn't pry. That's what I liked about Mark, he never forced words out of you. He just made space for them. You know, he said, sometimes, walking away from something toxic isn't abandonment, it's survival. That sentence lingered with me long after he left. The following weekend, I decided to take a small road trip, nothing fancy, just a few hours outside Dallas to a quiet lake town I used to visit with my grandfather when I was little. The air was crisp, the water calm, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without guilt. I rented a small cabin with creaky wooden floors and a porch that overlooked the water. Every morning, I'd sit outside with a cup of coffee, the scent of pine trees mixing with the cool wind, and watch the sunrise melt the fog. For once, there was no noise, no expectations, no judgment, no need to prove anything. But the silence also forced me to confront the truth. I'd been living my whole life trying to earn love that was never freely given. My worth had always depended on someone else's approval, and I was done with that. One night, I opened my old notebook, the same one I'd packed when I left home years ago. Inside were pages of quotes, journal entries, dreams I'd written and forgotten. Near the back, I found a note I'd written to myself at 21. "One day, they'll see what you're capable of. But even if they never do, you will." I stared at it for a long time, tears welling in my eyes. That younger version of me had no idea how much pain was ahead, but she still believed in something better. The next morning, I made a decision, not about them, but about me. I would stop surviving and start living. Back in Dallas, I applied for a promotion at the center, program director. It was a long shot. I'd be managing grants and budgets, the very kind of work my father said I wasn't cut out for. But something in me whispered, try anyway. A week later, Mark called me into his office. "Emily," he said, smiling, "you got it." I froze. "Are you serious?" "You earned it. You've been running this place unofficially for months." When I walked out of that office, my heart was pounding. The world outside looked different, brighter, sharper. The traffic, the heat, even the city noise felt alive. I treated myself to something I hadn't had in years, a nice dinner alone. A small Italian restaurant near downtown, dim lights, jazz playing softly in the background. I ordered pasta, wine, and dessert. No guilt, no rush. For the first time, I wasn't eating to fill the silence. I was celebrating it. As I left the restaurant, I caught my reflection in the window again. I looked the same, but something in my eyes had changed. There was calm there. Strength. I smiled to myself and whispered, "You're finally breathing different." But peace is fragile. And sometimes, the past waits just long enough for you to find it before it comes knocking again. 6 months passed. The seasons shifted, and so did I. Dallas summers had melted into the muted warmth of autumn, the kind that paints the trees gold and turns the evening air soft and forgiving. Life had finally found rhythm again. I wasn't just surviving, I was building. Every morning, I'd walk to work with a coffee in hand and my headphones on, passing the same bakery that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. The world seemed lighter, not because it changed, but because I had. At the Family Outreach Center, my new position as program director challenged me more than I expected. Budgets, donors, paperwork, endless meetings, things I once thought I hated now made me feel powerful. I was making decisions that mattered. I was proving, not to them, but to myself, that I was capable. And people started noticing. One day, while setting up a local fundraiser, a donor approached me, a woman named Rachel Miller, known in the community for her philanthropy and sharp business mind. After the event, she pulled me aside. "You handled that crisis like a pro," she said. "You ever think about starting something of your own?" I laughed nervously. "Me? I wouldn't even know where to start." "You'd figure it out," she smiled. "You've got fire, Emily. Don't let anyone dim it again." That night, her words replayed in my head over and over. Don't let anyone dim it again. Something shifted in me. I started staying late at the office, not from obligation, but from passion. I drafted proposals for new outreach programs, made calls, pitched ideas. Slowly, the foundation began expanding. And with each small win, I felt a piece of my old self, the quiet, fearful girl, fading away. Weeks turned into months. I stopped checking social media for glimpses of my family's life. I stopped replaying the words they'd said. I even stopped counting how long it had been since we spoke. It was like I was finally free. Then, one afternoon, fate decided to test me. I was at a networking conference in downtown Dallas, a sleek hotel ballroom full of entrepreneurs and charity directors. While I was chatting with a potential partner, I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Emily?" I turned and froze. It was Charlotte, my sister. She looked different, thinner, paler, her eyes tired. She wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes, just a simple dress and a nervous smile. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said softly. "Same," I replied, forcing my voice steady. She hesitated before speaking. "I heard about your promotion. And your foundation projects. You're doing amazing things." Her compliment felt genuine, and for a moment, it disarmed me. "Thanks," I said cautiously. "How's everything at home?" She swallowed. "Not good. Dad's business went under completely. Mom's been sick. Andrew moved to Houston, trying to start over. It's bad, Em." There it was again, that invisible pull between blood and pain. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "But there's nothing I can do." "I know," she said. "I just wanted you to know, we were wrong. All of us. Especially Dad." I looked at her, trying to read the truth in her eyes. There was no arrogance this time, no defense, just regret. "He talks about you," she continued. "He keeps saying he should have listened. That maybe if he had, things would have been different." For years, I'd dreamed of hearing those words. But now that they'd come, they didn't heal me the way I thought they would. Instead, they made me realize something deeper. I didn't need their apology to move forward. I smiled faintly. "Thank you for telling me that, Charlotte." She nodded, eyes glistening. "You've changed," she said. "You seem lighter." "I am," I replied. Because I finally stopped trying to prove anything. That night, driving home, I rolled down the windows and let the cool wind hit my face. The city lights flickered past like fragments of old memories, bright, distant, harmless. Somewhere between the past and the present, I had found myself again. As I parked outside my apartment, I looked at my reflection in the car mirror, same eyes, same face, but a different soul. I finally understand, I whispered. I was never broken. I was just in the wrong place too long. And for the first time, I believed it. Because growth isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the peace that replaces pain. And I was finally learning that peace was mine to keep. It happened on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, the kind of day that starts like any other and ends up changing everything. I was at my desk, reviewing funding reports, when my phone buzzed. The caller ID made my stomach tighten. Dad. For a full minute, I just stared at the screen, frozen. After all these years, all the silence, he was calling me directly. I could have ignored it. I should have. But something in me, curiosity, maybe closure, made me answer. Hello, Emily. His voice was gravelly, thinner than I remembered. I need to see you. What's this about? It's not about money, he said quickly. Please. Just meet me. Tomorrow. Same cafe where you saw Andrew. Click. No apology. No context. Just an order wrapped in desperation. That night, I barely slept. I kept asking myself what he could possibly want. Forgiveness? Help? Another favor dressed as reconciliation? By morning, I'd decided this wasn't about them anymore. I was going to that cafe, not to fix their mess, but to face it. The next day, I arrived early. The same corner table. The same faint smell of coffee and burnt toast. Only this time, I wasn't trembling. I was steady. When my father walked in, I barely recognized him. His suit was worn, his shoulders slumped, his hair silver and thin. He looked small, human. He sat across from me and sighed. You look well, he said. I am, I replied simply. He stared at his hands. I won't waste your time. I made mistakes, a lot of them. I thought money could replace love, control could replace care. But I was wrong. I stayed silent, letting him speak. Your mother's in treatment, he continued. Stress, mostly. Charlotte's trying to help, but things are bad. The house, the business, it's all gone. He looked up then, his eyes tired but sincere. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I need anything from you. Just because I am. The words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind, the confrontation, the revenge, the triumphant silence. But standing here, hearing him admit his failures, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. I used to hate you, I said quietly. For how you made me feel small. For cutting me out. But I think what I hated most was how much I still wanted you to care. He nodded slowly, shame softening his face. You were the only one brave enough to stand up to me, he said. I called it disrespect. But now I see it was strength. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You can't rewrite what happened, Dad. I know, he said. But maybe I can at least say thank you. You were right to leave. We sat there for a long time in silence. The hum of the cafe, the clink of coffee cups, the low murmur of conversations, all blending into a strange sense of peace. When he finally stood up, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. These are some papers, he said. From the sale of the last property. I put your name on part of it. It's not much, but... I raised my hand and stopped him. No, Dad. Keep it. I don't need your money. That was never what I wanted. He looked stunned, then nodded slowly. I understand. As he turned to leave, I said one last thing, not out of anger, but closure. You taught me what not to become. And for that, I'll always be grateful. He paused, his back still turned. I'm proud of you, Emily, he said softly. Even if I never deserved to be. And then he walked out. I stayed at that table long after he left, tracing the rim of my coffee cup, the warmth fading against my fingertips. I expected tears, but none came. Just calm. When I finally stepped outside, the afternoon sun washed over me soft, golden, forgiving. I looked up at the sky and smiled. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their inheritance. I didn't need revenge. All I ever needed was to stop chasing the love that hurt me. And as I walked away from that cafe, I realized something else. The past hadn't disappeared. It just didn't own me anymore. I didn't need to prove my worth to them. Because I finally knew it for myself. You know that feeling when the noise finally stops? When the voices in your head, the ones that sound like doubt, guilt, and old pain, finally go quiet. That's what peace felt like to me. Not a moment of celebration, but a silence I had waited my entire life to hear. Weeks passed after that meeting with my father. I didn't call him again, and he didn't call me. It wasn't bitterness this time, it was acceptance. Some wounds don't need closure to heal, they just need space. Work at the foundation was thriving. We'd just launched a new mentorship program for young women leaving foster care, girls who'd grown up like I did, unseen, unheard, unwanted. I poured my heart into that project. Every application I read, every story I listened to, reminded me why I had chosen this path. One afternoon, during orientation, a teenage girl named Maya stayed behind after everyone else had left. She was shy, quiet, eyes downcast. "Miss Carter," she asked softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, setting down my clipboard. "Do you ever stop being angry at people who hurt you?" Her question froze me. It was so raw, so familiar. I took a deep breath before answering. "Yes," I said finally. "But not because they deserve forgiveness, because you deserve peace." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I smiled, recognizing that pain, that longing. When she walked away, I felt something warm spread through my chest, the kind of pride that isn't loud or public, but sacred. That night, I drove back to the lake, the same cabin from months ago. The autumn air was crisp, the scent of pine sharper than before. As I stood by the water, the reflection of the moon rippling across the surface, I thought about everything that had brought me here. My father's disappointment, my mother's silence, my brother's arrogance, my own fear. They had all been chapters in a story I thought would destroy me. But instead, they'd become the reason I found myself. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, and whispered into the night. What I learned was this: sometimes losing everything you thought mattered is how you find what truly does. I wrote those words down in my notebook, letting the ink dry slowly on the page. They didn't sound like revenge. They sounded like freedom. As the hours passed, I thought about calling Charlotte, maybe even visiting Mom. But I didn't rush it. I'd learned that healing isn't a race, it's a rhythm. Some days you move forward, some days you just breathe. Both count. A soft breeze stirred the trees. Somewhere nearby, an owl called, low and distant. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind, to the water, to the sound of my own heartbeat steady and calm. I smiled. "I made it," I whispered. "Not rich, not famous, but whole." The world didn't need to know my story. I didn't need anyone to validate it. But if someone somewhere was sitting in the dark thinking they'd never be enough, maybe the story could remind them that pain doesn't define you. It refines you. Because the truth is, the girl who once begged to be seen had finally learned to see herself. And that was the moment, not the apology, not the success, when I truly won. The real victory isn't proving them wrong. It's realizing you never had to. And that was my peace. 2 years later. Dallas had changed: new buildings, new faces, new energy, but the skyline still felt like home. Not the kind of home you're born into, but the one you build from your own ashes. I was sitting in my office at the foundation, sunlight spilling through the tall windows, the faint hum of the city below. On my desk were 2 framed photos, one of the first group of graduates from our mentorship program, and one of me at the lake, smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in years. So much had shifted since that day in the cafe. My father had passed away 6 months ago. Heart failure. Charlotte called to tell me, her voice breaking through tears. "He asked for you at the end," she said. "He wanted you to know. He was proud." I didn't go to the funeral. Not because I was angry, but because I'd already said goodbye long before he died. I wrote a letter instead. I told him I forgave him, and I meant it. Not for his peace, but for mine. My mother, after years of denial, had finally started therapy. Charlotte and I talked now and then, slowly, cautiously. She'd found work as a teacher and seemed happy. Andrew, from what I heard, was still chasing business ventures, but we hadn't spoken. And that was okay. The funny thing about healing is that it doesn't erase the past, it just changes how it echoes. One Friday afternoon, I was locking up when Maya, that same quiet girl from before, walked into my office. Except now she wasn't the timid teenager I'd met. She was confident, radiant, and wearing a volunteer badge. "They accepted me into college," she said, grinning. "First in my family." "Maya, that's amazing." I hugged her, feeling that same warmth in my chest I'd felt the first day we met. She pulled back and said, "You were right, you know. About peace. About forgiveness. It's not about them. It's about finally breathing without the weight." I smiled. "Looks like you learned faster than I did." When she left, I sat alone for a moment, staring at the empty chair across from me. That space, once filled by ghosts of the people who broke me, now belonged to those I was helping build again. That night, I drove back to my apartment, though apartment didn't quite fit anymore. It was a cozy townhouse now, filled with plants, books, and laughter. Mark and I had grown close over time. It wasn't a fairy tale romance, it was something better, gentle, honest, real. He was in the kitchen when I walked in, cooking dinner. "You're late," he teased. "Maya got into college," I said. "Of course she did," he smiled. "She had the best mentor." I laughed and leaned against the counter. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the air. Simple. Warm. Safe. Later, after dinner, I sat on the balcony, watching the city lights blink like quiet reminders of everything that had changed. I thought about my father again, how much fear had driven him, how much silence had defined us. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't even pity him. I just understood him. Sometimes, I whispered to myself, people love the only way they know how, even if it hurts. The night breeze brushed my hair back, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I'd turned my pain into purpose, my loneliness into light, my scars into stories that helped others heal. And that's why I wanted to tell this story. Because maybe somewhere, someone is sitting where I once sat, broke, betrayed, forgotten, thinking their story is over. But it's not. It's just the painful beginning of something extraordinary. Because if I could rise from the ashes of my own family's rejection and find peace, maybe they can too. You are not your past. You are the person who survived it. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story, not because it's extraordinary, but because it's real. There was a time when I thought pain defined me. When I believed that being cut off from my family meant I had no value, no future. But standing here now, years later, I understand something I wish I could tell that younger version of me. You don't have to be chosen to be worthy. You just have to choose yourself. That's the lesson life keeps teaching me. I didn't get the fairy tale ending. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful hug that fixed decades of silence. What I got instead was peace, quiet, steady, honest peace. The kind that comes from forgiving without expecting anything in return. The kind that comes from letting go of people who only love you when you make sense to them. The kind that comes from realizing that closure isn't something others give you, it's something you decide to create. Now, every morning, when I walk into my office at the foundation, I see lives changing. I see girls like Maya finding strength, hope, and self-worth. I see versions of myself, the scared, broken girl I used to be, standing taller. And I realize, maybe that's why everything happened the way it did. If my family hadn't abandoned me, I would have never learned independence. If they hadn't humiliated me, I would have never found resilience. If they hadn't taken away my inheritance, I would have never built something that truly mattered. So if you're watching this and you've ever been rejected, betrayed, or made to feel invisible, listen to me. You are not disposable. You are not a failure. You are not what they said you were. You are proof that breaking isn't the end. It's the beginning of rebuilding yourself into something stronger. When I look back now, I don't see a victim. I see a survivor who refused to become bitter. I see a woman who walked through fire and didn't just come out alive, she came out shining. The fire didn't burn me, I tell myself. It refined me. And maybe that's the message I want to leave you with today. You can't control who hurts you. You can't rewrite your past. But you can decide right now that it won't define your future. So tell me, speech balloon, what was the moment when you chose yourself? Because that's the real turning point, isn't it? Not when they apologize, not when life gets easier, but when you finally decide you deserve peace more than you crave approval. If this story touched you, if you saw even a small part of yourself in it, please let me know. Backhand index pointing down. Comment below and share your I chose myself moment. Subscribe if you believe stories like this can heal others. And leave a like so this message reaches someone who needs it tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you for surviving with me. Because at the end of the day, survival is just the first step. What comes next is becoming. And that was my story, the one that started with rejection, but ended in peace. Maybe yours starts today.